The Promise of Murder. The name of the book is The Promise of Murder. It was published by Dell in 1961, but it's not the first publishing of this book. It originally went by the title of Melora when it was first printed in 1959. The cover art is by Mort Engel, one of the great good girl artists of the era. This is Melora on the cover here, you can see. This isn't the main character, Anne, but the person who the original book was named after, Melora. It could be argued that the book is a romantic thriller along the lines of Rebecca, where the main character is a woman who recently married a guy that she hadn't known very long, and there seems to be some secrets or a sordid past or something as strange as afoot, and now she doesn't know what to do. In this book we have Anne. She's recently married to Brent, and Brent has an ex-wife, that's Melora. She looks a little bit nicer in the art than she was described in the book, but hey, that's what you got to do to sell them, right? Anne is left alone in a great big house, and a blizzard comes by, and she's pretty much trapped in this house with the snow piling up and the wind banging against the windows. And all of a sudden, Melora shows up in the house, the ex-wife, and starts asking for money. And shortly after that, Anne starts discovering notes throughout the house about how someone wants to kill her. And ergo, the promise of murder in the title. Eventually, the family comes back, and Anne is not alone at the house anymore. But all of a sudden, people that they know are showing up dead outside in the snow or in the subway. And Anne doesn't know how any of this relates to the promisings of murder that she got, or any of the other people that are in the house, some of which are making it very clear that they wish that she was not there. Let's read a page. The snowplow was almost at the corner. An automobile came along in its wake slowly, its lights revealing a single track along the street. The plow had left jagged, heaped-up drifts edging that single track. Suddenly the snow itself, the wild flurries of wind, seemed obscurely ominous and threatening. She drew the brown velvet curtains across the windows. Certainly the snow was far heavier than it was even an hour ago. However, the one car she had seen cheered her. Besides, if Dr. Cox could get out to dinner, he could come to see Daphne. The streets were still open. She sipped the sherry and put the delicate little glass on the table with a hand that unexpectedly trembled. The sherry spilled, and she mopped it up with her handkerchief, scrubbing hard at the tabletop with the scrap of white linen. It was not sensible to get into a panic, because she was alone in a big house with a sick child, and the wind and snow seemed to shut her off from the safe, accustomed world. She could use the telephone at any time. Well, shortly she won't be able to use the telephone because the line's going to be dead. The author of this book is Mignon G. Eberhart. I think that the strength of the book is in the sort of atmospheric descriptions of the house and the place and the storm, and it kind of umps up the thrills that are going on. You really feel trapped with poor Anne, who's in this house with a sick child in the excerpt that I just read. So I think that Eberhart really did a good job of that, and that's actually what she's most praised for as a writer. At the end of the book, during the last act, they leave the house, and I think it weakens the story for them to leave. I think if she had figured out a way for the characters to stay in the house it might have been more successful. It ends just fine. There certainly are no problems with the way the story ends, but every loose thread is tied up neatly. But they got out of the house, and some of that thrill seemed to dissipate. Ah, well, I would happily read another book by her. If you're wondering about this Mignon G, Eberhart, I'll tell you a bit about her. Her parents named her Mignonette when she was born in 1899 in Lincoln, Nebraska. The name Mignonette might sound a little bit redundant. Mignon means little thing, and the "et" suffix indicates the diminutive, so her birth name literally meant the little thing. Maybe she was an itty-bitty baby, like a preemie or something. I don't know. Regardless, Mignonette didn't stay itty-bitty forever, and eventually she just called herself Mignon. I've heard some people refer to her as Mignon, but I'm going to try and do the French pronunciation so that you don't think that I'm talking about one of those little yellow guys. Mignon wrote as a hobby during her teens. Writing plays and fiction was more fun than studying Caesar's commentaries and algebra, she said. Later, she worked in libraries, so even if she stopped writing, she was surrounded by words. Writing as a means of entertaining herself would start again after her 1923 marriage to a, quote, handsome blonde giant. That would have been Alanson Eberhart. Mignon kept her maiden name Good as her middle name. Mr. Eberhart was a civil engineer, helping communities build infrastructure like bridges and dams. His work brought the newlywed couple to some of the sleepier parts of already sleepy Nebraska. They moved more than 20 times in the first 10 years of their marriage. While her husband was building bridges, Eberhart found herself completely bored. So bored that she started writing fiction again to fill her time. She'd read that mysteries were the most lucrative of genres, so she tried her hand at them. Her first published piece was a mystery novella, The Dark Corridor, in Flynn's magazine in 1925. 4 years later, she published her first novel, The Patient in Room 18. And the book was a hit. It sold 25,000 copies in its first year. Room 18 features the crime-solving duo Nurse Sarah Keat and Detective Lance O'Leary. Eberhart would write 7 Nurse Keat mysteries, the second of which won her the Scotland Yard Prize in 1931. By the end of the 1930s, Eberhart was the leading female crime novelist in the United States. Publishers touted her as the Mistress of Mystery, or the First Lady of Mystery, and America's Agatha Christie. But actually, Eberhart didn't like the comparison to Christie, maybe because the publishers gave that moniker to a number of other female mystery writers. It should be noted, too, that despite the nickname's implications, the bulk of Eberhart's books were not, in fact, mysteries. These sleuthless novels, The Promise of Murder included, might better fit under the genre of romantic suspense. But despite this semantic quibble, her popularity during her lifetime was significant. Fans of her writing included President Harry Truman and Gertrude Stein. In the 1940s, her book output took a noticeable dip. Eberhart was consumed with relationship problems. In 1943, she divorced her bridge-building husband, and 3 years later, she married a man named John Hazen Perry. And 2 years after that, she divorced him too. During that split, she lived on the Flying M.E. Divorce Ranch in Nevada. In the mid-20th century, Nevada divorce laws were laxer than the other states, so getting a divorce was faster and easier in Reno than at home. So folks who'd lost that love and feeling could rent a place at these ranches for 6 weeks, ride horses, go swimming or skiing, depending on the season, imbibe beers and cocktails for just long enough to meet the residency requirements, and then divorce their uninvited spouses. Divorce tourism, as it became known, was a major part of the state's economy for a few decades. Other writers who spent time in a Nevada divorce ranch were Arthur Miller and Edgar Rice Burroughs. After divorcing Perry, Eberhart remarried her first husband, Allinson. She was once quoted as saying, "Marriage is forever, or should be." And she must have meant it the third time, because she and Allinson remained married until his death in 1974. And after the years of mind-numbing Nebraska post-divorces, Eberhart got to see more of the world. She and her once-again husband lived in France, Florida, Chicago, Washington, D.C., New Jersey, and Manhattan, finally coming to find a permanent home in Connecticut. After those tumultuous years of romance and heartbreak, Eberhart cranked out about a novel a year, going all the way to novel 59, which was published just before her 89th birthday. At the height of her popularity, Eberhart was one of the top-paid female writers in the nation. 9 movies were based on her writings, and 1 book was turned into a show on Broadway. Late in life, she was involved in the Famous Writers School. This was a correspondence course school, co-run by the guy who did the similar Famous Artists School. The idea was that students, after paying rather exorbitant tuition, would send in their fiction and essays to be evaluated by a professional writer. And the ads gave the impression that the readers were top authors and screenwriters like Eberhart or Rod Serling.
I'm Rod Serling, kind of an expatriate from the Twilight Zone. I'm a writer. I've been one almost 20 years. I've faced its problems and enjoyed its rewards. That's what I'd like to spend a few moments talking to you about, writing. Have any of you ever thought of writing? I'm one of a dozen writers who believe that there are many talented people all over the country who could write well, write successfully, if they had the proper guidance, the proper encouragement from experienced professionals. And now there is a way for you to learn writing from famous authors. Several years ago, 12 of us, all professional writers, got together. Among us were Faith Baldwin, who has written 80 novels, Bennett Cerf, the author and publisher, Max Schulman, the humorist and creator of Dobie Gillis, Bruce Catton, the Pulitzer Prize winner. We started the Famous Writers School to bring professional training to people who wanted to write, no matter where they live. You learn right at home on your own time schedule. Yet what you're offered is an individual attention you could never receive in a classroom.
But the truth was, the famous folks in the ads never touched students' work. That was all copy-edited and critiqued by grunts employed by the school. The superstars in the ads were paid in company stock to design the lessons, not read amateurs' work. The scam was eventually revealed, and the school president encouraged Eberhart to sell her stock before it became worthless, though she reportedly refused to do so. She certainly didn't need the school's stocks. She was rich, but maybe she just liked the idea of being part of a community of writers. You get the impression that she loved the fame of being a best-selling author, rubbing elbows with the movers and shakers in literary circles. She was a social butterfly. Among her friends, she counted the poet Ogden Nash, authors John Jakes and Faith Baldwin, book critic Fanny Butcher, and pot brownie chef Alice B. Toklas. Mignon Eberhart passed away in 1996 at the ripe age of 95. It's always interesting to me to discover a writer that I'd never heard of before that was hugely popular and maybe even like a household name while they were alive. And once they passed away and there weren't any more new books coming out, they just sort of faded into obscurity. I'm sure there's plenty of Eberhart fans still out there devouring her books, reading them again and again. But this was my first time, and I would be willing to read another book by her. If it came up on the El Cheapo website that I like to peruse. So, are you a big Eberhart fan? Do you have a recommendation for someone who might want to explore the author's literary output, leave a comment down below. Also leave a comment if you knew someone who did a little divorce vacation in Reno back in the day. Maybe Grandma got rid of her old husband before she met Grandpa and had tales to tell. Also, leave a comment if you knew someone who signed up for the Famous Writers School, or even the Famous Artists School for that matter. I find that stuff fascinating. I myself did apply for the, I didn't apply for the Famous Artists School, but I did order their little application. You know, can you draw this pirate? Can you draw the turtle? Saw it in the back of a comic book, and I was just curious and ordered it, but I never submitted it. I went to art school the hard way. Anyway, leave your comments down below. I'd be happy to read any of your thoughts on Eberhart and these things. And I'll see you next time.